got something that might interest you.
Resident Evil 4 has a very interesting development. The Capcom developed game spanned across 6 years, many different concepts, and multiple directors. It was first announced back at Tokyo Game Show in 2002, and released initially for the Nintendo GameCube in 2005. Originally starting development way back in 1999, it was under the team Capcom Production Studio 4, which was headed by the original Resident Evil director, Shinji Mikami. The game is regarded as one of the best in the franchise, and with it now being on damn near every games platform available since 2005, it's become one of the most well-known Resident Evil games as well. For better or worse, it has been the basis of all Resident Evil games since its release up until 2017's Resident Evil 7. Sadly, the format was diluted into pure action in Resident Evil 5 and 6, but it did inspire many other games like it, such as the Evil Within series. It went on to become one of the most influential games in the last 2 decades. In this video, I'll be going through the build-up to release of one of the best action horror games available. Ladies and gentlemen, all aboard the hype train for
Resident Evil 4.
Shinji Mikami may have been the head of Production Studio 4 at Capcom, but the first director put in for Resident Evil 4 was Hideki Kamiya, the director of Resident Evil 2. This first version of the game was in development for the PlayStation 2, and was to be a cool and stylish action game based in a location called Mallet Island, an Umbrella facility. You were to play as a character called Tony Redgrave, with a twin brother called Virgil. These two characters were going to be the sons of Resident Evil 1's Spencer Mansion owner, Oswell E. Spencer. They were to have superhuman powers through the use of the G-Virus. Originally, the game was designed to play similar to the early installments of the series, but soon mutated into something much more action-packed. A game containing guns, swords, and a red coat-wearing, white-haired half-demon named Dante. Sound familiar? This first attempt at making Resident Evil 4 became a franchise of its own in the Devil May Cry franchise, first releasing back in 2001. The Devil May Cry series would go on to become incredibly successful itself, inspiring other popular series such as Bayonetta and Ninja Gaiden. Shinji Mikami liked the project, but felt it was a step too far away from the franchise roots. And obviously this isn't the route that Resident Evil ended up taking. As such, director Hideki Kamiya moved on to other projects, eventually forming Platinum Games and some of the best hack-and-slash games available, including a personal favourite of mine, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. With Devil May Cry released, Resident Evil 4 was back to square one. Shinji Mikami hired a new director to build the next version of the game, Hiroshi Shibata, known for his development on the later released Bayonetta, Resident Evil 3, and Okami. Some of his work was also credited in the final version of Resident Evil 4. At this point in development, Hiroshi made several concepts for the game, and these versions collectively are referred to online as Resident Evil 3.5. The first of 2 to be shown to the public is now known as the Fog or Castle version. This was only shown at the Tokyo Game Show back in 2002 and was the first footage of the game to ever be revealed. So footage for this version is scarce online, but judging by the footage, it was going to be set in a mansion or castle, but also on an airship in some parts. This version does start to show what would become the final version of Resident Evil 4. It seems to use the same character model for Leon S. Kennedy, and some other art assets seem similar to the final game. It's hard to tell what game engine this used, but it appears to be a slightly modified version of the older Resident Evil games. The backgrounds still look pre-rendered in some areas, and the movement looks similar to the older Resident Evil games. Even the shooting mechanics look the same. The main difference is camera angles. Although similar to older Resident Evil games of fixed camera positions, the camera seems to move much more with the player, and using much more dynamic angles than before. It's hard to tell what happened to this version of the game. It does look similar to the next version that was shown, but ultimately, this appears to be the only footage released for this design. Some concepts appear to have been transferred over to the final game, such as Leon being infected by a virus or monster of fog, thus the nickname for this version. This version of the game was developed for the Nintendo GameCube after Capcom struck a deal with Nintendo to create the Capcom 5. 5 games to release exclusive to the Nintendo GameCube to help boost the system's struggling sales. Resident Evil 4 continued its troubled development with the next version shown, commonly known as the Hookman version. First shown at E3 Expo 2003, it was introduced by Satoru Iwata and Shinji Mikami at Nintendo's press conference. with the promise it was going to be scarier than ever before. The game footage was met with incredibly high praise. Even looking at the footage now, I can see why. A dark, creepy atmosphere was accompanied with interesting game mechanics and incredible graphics for the time. Graphics far too good for any console at the time, and probably even for the PS3 and Xbox 360 era of consoles. The lighting alone was far beyond what we would see for several years on games consoles. It also had an interesting game mechanic of Leon dealing with hallucinations, where the environment would turn blue to show what was happening wasn't real, and ultimately looked like a cross between the final Resident Evil 4 and classic Resident Evil gameplay. Over-the-shoulder aiming, quick-time events, and some fixed camera angles also came with an overall much more horror-focused version than the final release. The Hookman seemed to be one of the key enemies in the game, looking to potentially work a bit like the Nemesis enemy in Resident Evil 3. Sadly though, the ambition of this version of the game would be its downfall. Despite Shinji Mikami stating development was coming along nicely, with some rumours circulating that it was about 50% complete at the time of showing it, the hardware available just could not handle the demand of the game. Lead writer on the Hookman version, Yasushi Kimura, stated, "You were not supposed to know when Leon's hallucination would happen. Various hidden checkpoints would trigger Leon's fear into hallucination. Depending on the player's behaviour, the structure of the stage changed, so we had to create two types of 3D models. That doubles the amount of cost when it comes to design and rendering. Even if we did have the budget, it was almost impossible to cram all of that into the GameCube's memory. We couldn't even add any monsters. The Hookman version of the game is regarded by many to be the best looking version of the game, but sadly it never came to be. There is some fan versions of this game online, but this ambitious title never saw release and was ultimately cancelled to make way for the final version of the game." Details stayed scarce on the game for another year. The occasional interview with developers and writers gave snippets of information on what state the game was currently in. It wasn't until May 12, 2004 at Nintendo's E3 press conference that we would get to see the final version of the game. The same conference in which Nintendo would show the DS for the first time and the first trailer for Zelda Twilight Princess, we also got to see the state of Resident Evil 4 and what we'd be playing in less than a year. It was now being directed by Shinji Mikami, director of Resident Evil 1 and the original producer for Resident Evil 4. The game had become an over-the-shoulder action horror game with hordes of zombies and giant trolls. I think this was the first E3 conference I ever saw, and 13-year-old me was damn excited for this game. This was pretty much my first experience of the series, and it looked incredible. And well, if you've played Resident Evil 4, you'll know that it still is. We would get a few more trailers between E3 and its eventual release, with a key trailer being shown at Tokyo Game Show in September 2004, showing more action gameplay, more ideas of the story, and showing off the voice acting and cutscenes.
On my first day in the Force.
That is the incident with the viral outbreak, right?
Which even by today's standards are still impressive thanks to the fight choreography and three-dimensional modelling of the characters. A couple of variants of this trailer appeared online in the following months, but this was basically the final trailer for the game. Then, after a 6-year development, at least 4 different versions of the game, and 3 different directors, the game finally released on January 11th, 2005, surprisingly to America first, with Japan following shortly on January 27th, and Europe on March 18th. The game received critical acclaim from both critics and its players, being hailed as the best Resident Evil ever, with scores in excess of 9 out of 10, and even today still holding a 96% average rating on Metacritic. I remember trying to get this game on first day of release. It had sold out pretty much everywhere, which for a GameCube game was incredibly rare. The game flew off the shelves and was one of the best Nintendo GameCube exclusives ever. For about 10 months at least, where on October 25th, 2005, the game was released on PS2, after Capcom decided that the game didn't fall within Nintendo's 5-game exclusivity deal, along with the only other games that did well in this collection, Killer 7 and Beautiful Joe. The game didn't stay on just these systems for long though. Resident Evil 4 is probably one of the most ported games of all time. After the PS2 release, we got a PC version from March 2007. The Wii, complete with great pointer controls, came in May 2007. Some awful looking versions for something called the Zeebo and the iPhone in February 2008 and July 2009 respectively. PS3 and Xbox 360 in September 2011, a HD Ultimate Edition for PC, PS4 and Xbox One in August 2016, the version I've been using for this video, and finally an exclusive reveal, an Apple Watch version in 2019. Thankfully, that isn't real. I hope. Overall, Resident Evil 4 had one crazy development, but it led to one of the best games of the past 2 decades, and it's on so many systems you probably already own something to play it on. If it comes to Nintendo Switch, I will probably buy it there as well, because who doesn't want to experience this fantastic game portably?
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Thank you all for watching. My name is Phil, I'm the creator of this video. There was a lot of footage and history to dig through for this game, so if I missed anything out, please feel free to mention them in the comments below. And if you enjoy this episode of Ticket to the Hype Train, please like and subscribe for more, and there are 2 more videos on screen now. Until the next video guys, thank you for watching.
Is that all, stranger? Thank you.